This is Candace 2. This title is gigantic. My top 5 guesses for this year's Gambler's Choice Freedom Series Collector Club Web Special. Again, I don't currently work for Breyer and I'm not in touch with anybody that does. This is just me taking fun guesses, making stuff up. I will probably always call them classics, and we will shorten this to CC GC for ease. If you're new to classics or Freedom Series, they're 1/12 scale, so they're kind of in the middle of Breyer offerings as far as size. Gambler's Choice means you don't get to pick your model. You get a surprise, but you will be able to see the mold and the various colors before you purchase. Breyer has technically released one per year since 2017 with one outlier. It usually comes out in the spring, and in March this year, we did get a sneak peek of what everyone was guessing to be the CC GC. But now we're at the end of June, so if there is one coming, it hit production and shipping delays like everything else in the world. We got a new sneak peek in May of what we're still assuming is the CC GC. For my 2022 CC GC guesses, I went back to research previous GCs to check for patterns. Let's go through them all real quick and I'll show you what I found. Scotty became the first Gambler's Choice web special. In summer 2016, collectors could vote which color out of 4 they wanted the release to be, with Breyer later stating the votes were pretty much a tie, so they produced 500 each of the top 3 winners. In April 2017, for $30 a piece, Collector Club members would be surprised with either a matte bay roan Appaloosa based on Burbank, a velvet rope event model, a glossy dark bay Tobiano based on Jazz Fusion, a connoisseur model, or a glossy silver bay based on Uncalled For, a short-run Collector's Choice model. This mold was sculpted by Marine Love, not for Breyer, but for Hagen Renneker, as a portrait model of thoroughbred racehorse swaps. Breyer acquired the rights to the mold at 1/12 scale and released it in plastic in 1975. The last time this mold had been used was for a blockbuster exclusive of Seabiscuit to coincide with the film release in 2003. In September 2017, about 5 months after Scotty was released, Breyer announced the Gambler's Choice was back and offered Collector Club members Calvin, a blanket Appaloosa in a run of 500 of each of 3 colors. This is only the second time Breyer has issued a Gambler's Choice 1/12 model, but with this release, all coat patterns are the same, and they've included a decorator. Calvin came in matte chestnut, matte bay, or metallic blue. He's on the show stock horse mold, which was released in 2008, and the artist is uncredited. This might be something that was stipulated in a contract. The show stock horse mold may still have been available on shelves as a Classics Bay quarter horse, though it had just been retired in 2016. Callahan is the 1/12 CC GC for 2018 and was modeled after 3 special run models previously released on the Othello mold. A matte silver bay inspired by Silverado, the 2008 connoisseur model, a glossy silver filigree based on Silver Snow, the 2008 winter web special, and a glossy Palomino Sabino based on Pamplemousse, the Just About Horses subscriber special. Breyer didn't release the quantities this time as they have before, at least not that I could find, but the price has stayed the same at $30 since the first release. This little Shire was sculpted by Kathleen Moody, the same artist who sculpted Othello, the mold of the releases Callahan's colors are based on. Side note, I love that Breyer did this. They used an artist's 1/12 draft mold in 3 colors, previously offered on that same artist's 1/9 draft mold. The Shire B mold, as it's been nicknamed, was first released in 2003. Before becoming Callahan, it was last used as a web special in 2014. Lancelot was offered in spring of 2019 to CC members at a slight price increase to $35 each from past years at $30. He came in 3 different colors: glossy palomino, matte semi-leopard Appaloosa, and as another glossy blue decorator. I can't find any other information on this release other than his retired page on Breyer's website, which states, "In case you missed it, Lancelot is back." I'm not sure what that means. Was he offered somewhere previously? Did email subscribers get an advance notice of this listing going live? Did they resell extra models that didn't sell at the initial release? They do mention an Appaloosa has never been done on this mold before, and the Palomino was based on the old 5-gator. So I'm guessing the copy mentioning something old is in reference to the mold itself. The something new means the Appaloosa pattern never being used on this mold before. The something borrowed means the Palomino color once used on the 62 to 71 5-gator, and the something blue is of course the decorator. Lancelot is on the Man of War mold sculpted by Maureen Love, initially for Hagen Reneker. She had created a portrait series of 5 racehorses, including Swaps, which was used for the first CC GC Scotty. Breyer negotiated for rights in plastic, releasing them in 1975. Before being used as Lancelot, this mold was available online as Man of War and may have been retired in 2018. Nayati was used as the CC GC in 2020, the very next year after the mold's initial release. Nayati was the second use of the mold, known as the Rearing Mustang. Breyer didn't tell us how many were produced, but the cost remained the same as last year at $35. Nayati came in a glossy chestnut Appaloosa, a matte dark bay Pinto, and a glossy Donalino. The Rearing Mustang was sculpted by Maggie Jenner Bennett and first released in 2019 as American Dream, the very first appearance of this very popular mold. Slyder was the Gambler's Choice web special for 2021, issued in again 3 colors: a glossy flaxen liver chestnut splash Pinto, a glossy dark dapple gray, and a glossy buckskin blanket Appaloosa. Slyder was $35, but the quantity of each color is unknown. The mold is called Hollywood Dennett and was created as a portrait model of the champion reigner Hollywood Dennett. The mold is in the position of a sliding stop, which is a move taught to horses who compete in reining. It was sculpted by artist C.M. Herden and was first released in 1998. This mold was last used in 2016 as the NRHA 50th anniversary model. I tried to compare past offerings to see if I could find a pattern. Here's what I discovered. Not much. Every gambler so far has been a male, so it's probably safe to say we'll get another one. It almost looked like Breyer went vintage, newish, vintage, vintage, new, vintage, which would technically give us a newish mold if there is a pattern here, and if you can say newish means 9 years old, while vintage is 15 years old. The last time the mold was seen in production didn't seem to be a clue either, with years between uses as short as 1 year and as long as 14 years apart. I tried looking at breeds, and there's been a little bit of everything: thoroughbred, quarter horse, Shire, Mustang. I also considered the artist or sculptor of the mold. Breyer has used 2 molds from 1 artist. 3 artists have each had 1 mold used, and 1 artist's mold is uncredited. The only thing any of this hints at for me is Breyer trying to utilize Maureen Love's molds. I did see this bit of text on Identify Your Breyer about one of Maureen's molds. Quote, Breyer no longer has an agreement with Hagen Reneker for the mass production of this mold, and it will likely only be seen in special runs in the future. I don't know when that went into effect, and I don't know how many models are affected. It could be that the rights to produce this mold in plastic has expired, or at least has a limit on the amount Breyer can produce. I took note of the model's position too, where half are in motion and half are standing still. There wasn't a pattern with poses, as it went standing, standing, trotting, standing, rearing, sliding. Maybe this means we'll be back to standing? Maybe this has nothing to do with anything at all? Using that information, I came up with my top 5-ish guesses for this year's CC GC. I also combed the Identify Your Breyer site to pick out a handful of molds that are aesthetically pleasing, which did influence my shortlist. I honestly completely overlooked this mold until I'd finished my list, but it makes a pretty good candidate, so I'm gonna let them cut in line as a runner-up. The Standing Thoroughbred was introduced in 2006, and it was sculpted by Jane Lunger. This gives us a new artist, and if you're taking stance into consideration, this alert standing position feels right at home in the series. The mold debuted in porcelain and wasn't issued in plastic until becoming Amelia, the Horse of the Year for 2014. If you go by 2014, this makes the mold newish, in my opinion. The mold is currently being used as National Velvet and in a Spotted Wonders set. This might be too many current uses to warrant a web special though. The Warm Blood Mare was released in 2007, making her 15 years old, which I guess would fall closer to vintage. She was sculpted by Susan Carlton Sifton, so that would give us a new artist, and she's been a popular mold with several releases. Her most recent release has been a regular run thoroughbred, currently in production. The only things I see holding her back are that she's a mare, and she was used 4 times during the Blossom series in 2012. Although that was 10 years ago. Fairfax is a Morgan Stallion sculpted by Mindy Berg and was first released in 2020 as Horse of the Year. He's only been used 4 times so far, but is currently in production as 3 of those releases, which, like the Standing Thoroughbred, might be too many current uses to warrant a web special. I feel his stance is very similar to Past CC GCs. He's a he, he's new, which deviates a little from the pattern if there is one, but it would also introduce a different breed and another artist's work to the series. Currently, this Morgan Stallion is being used as Keep the Peace, but Breyer also has both the Black Stallion and Solar Flare currently in production, and they're on the same mold. One's a unicorn and one's a horse, so it seems Breyer doesn't mind having both in their line at the same time. I'm just worried about him being used for 3 products already. Something to consider here. Of the 6 releases so far, none of the molds have had current production models on the shelves at the time of release, except for Nayati. Granted, 4 of those releases were on vintage molds that hadn't been used in a while. There are not that many 112 molds, and if Breyer doesn't have the rights to produce Marine's molds anymore, it's hard to say if they'll be able to stick to a mold that isn't currently in production. The stock horse gelding was sculpted by Sommer Prosser and introduced in 2002 in porcelain, but wasn't available in plastic until 2014 when used as a Breyerfest store special. I consider 2014 newish, and the mold is a he, and he'd give us a new artist. He's been a fairly popular mold with his most recent use as a unicorn, currently in production, and before that a quarter horse. His pose is somewhat timid, but he's got the cutest face. I don't really see anything holding this guy back from being the CC GC. My number 2 spot is going to Maureen Love, simply because her molds have been used twice before, and I'm wondering if there's a pattern with the releases. So far, it's been Love, Artist, Artist, Love, Artist, Artist, which could put us back at another Love mold. I'm guessing 2 molds here for different reasons, but also just because I like the number 2. First, the Arabian Mare. I just think she's the cutest little thing and would make a lovely CC GC. She was first introduced in 1973, and her most recent release was Cosette in 2014. Her setbacks? Well, she's a mare. And Breyer is also releasing an Arabian as the first Premier Club model. This is also the mold with the copy on her page about Breyer no longer having the rights to mass produce her. If Breyer has increased their production of Gambler's Choice models up from 500 each, and I bet they have, she might not qualify for production as a special run. And even though it was 8 years ago now, Cosette may have been the Arabian mare's only chance at being a CC web special. I just really wanted her to have another shot at being used again. Second, Terang. He's one of the thoroughbred portrait horses Love sculpted for Hagen Renneker and would be the third mold from the series used as a CC GC. I chose him for that fact, as well as his stance and his cute face. He was used throughout the 90s as regular runs, but he does have one setback. He was a 2016 web special based off Lionheart, who was a flagship model in 2012. For that reason, and I'm cheating a bit, I might have to switch my guess to Silky. He was also a portrait thoroughbred from the series, and he was used a bit throughout the 90s, but his most recent use was back in 2002, when he was actually used as a portrait model of race mare Winning Colors. This also reminds us that Breyer can alternate genders with their molds, though I have no idea if molds first released as female can be changed to a male. Mason, or the American Saddlebred, was released in 2018 as the Horse of the Year, and he's only been used a handful of times. Once was the Halloween Classic, once was a retailer exclusive unicorn, and once was a 90s decorator, which is still currently in production. I love the idea of doing another round of mini-me, like the Othello to Shire release with Callahan, and doing a mini 70s Saddlebred, a mini Lafayette, and a mini Hamilton. The traditional Hamilton mold has been wildly popular, and it'd be really fun to have 112 versions of him. I also thought the sneak peek Breyer gave us in March resembled Hamilton a little bit, and while I think it'd be really fun, these minis might just be too close to their traditional counterpart, and the mini Hamilton looks really close to an existing Salem. Breyer might also save this mold to do a mini-me release a little later on, once Hamilton has some more colors. I still really love this idea anyway. I can't find which artist sculpted this mold, which might be something the artist stipulated in their agreement, or it could be Breyer didn't mention it anywhere anyone could find. That would make him the second time an artist goes uncredited in this series. His mold is pretty dynamic compared to the standing still models in the series, but so is Shire B, Nayati, and Slyder. I don't see anything in particular that would keep him from being the CC GC. And those are my guesses for this year's CC GC. Have you imagined it to be a mold in particular? Do you think it'll be one of my guesses? I'd love to know. What's under here that I can't fit? Recording. My top 5 guesses for the far as offerings. Ugh. And Breyer. What? I already know I don't like it. Was that fine? That was fine.